Greetings, vinyl community, and welcome to a VC Friday deep dive. There have been about 2,356 videos out there displaying the brand new Jethro Tull album, Curious Ruminant. And just for the record, here's my copy. I ordered the special edition from Vision Merch, so this is the translucent or transparent grape edition. They can't call it purple, they have to call it transparent grape. And it's all I can do to restrain myself from licking it to see if it's really grape. But so far I've managed to be disciplined and not do that. So that is the new Jethro Tull album. Here is the gatefold showing the assorted minions who accompany Ian Anderson on his latest project. But that's not the album that I'm talking about today. The album I'm talking about today goes back to the 1970s, Jethro Tull's peak period, and it's actually the album that, out of Jethro Tull's strongest period, I think maybe most people would call their weakest album from the 70s. I'd really like someone to contradict me on that. I'd be really pleased if someone tells me, oh no, that's my favorite Tull album of all. But it is 1976, and the album is Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. Now, there was always a strong theatrical aspect to Jethro Tull, and in their early days, that was expressed in Ian Anderson's crazed stage antics, where he would leap and writhe across the stage, gesticulating wildly, and of course doing the celebrated one-legged flute player pose. By 1972 and the Thick as a Brick tour, the stage show had evolved to include props, costumes, and Python-esque comedy skits. And a year later, there were film interludes incorporated into the stage show. So a logical next step was to expand out of the standard album tour cycle into actual theatrical media. Efforts to produce a feature film centered around 1974's War Child album came to nothing. In 1975, Ian Anderson had the idea to produce a stage musical. In November of '75, Jethro Tull had entered the Morgan Studio A in Brussels to record songs for the next Jethro Tull album. And the idea was that it would be a concept album with a theme of people with different occupations, different ways of life. And one of the songs was Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, a song about a biker character who clings onto his leather jacket and greasy hair while all of his peers have grown straight and gone into suburban middle-class life. Just to get this out of the way, throughout this video I will be referring to Dee Palmer. Of course, we all know that she was known as David Palmer at the time this was all happening. It's just out of respect I will refer to her by her present name and gender. If that seems a little confusing, I'm sure we can all deal with it. So, after relocating to Montreux, Switzerland, Ian Anderson and Dee Palmer continued to work on some of the songs from the Brussels recordings, including Too Old to Rock and Roll, and Ian Anderson got the idea of extrapolating that song into a full storyline that could be a stage musical. Dee Palmer mentioned a friend named Ray Lomas who seemed to fit the image of the character in the song, And so it was decided that Ray Lomas would be the principal character in the theatrical presentation Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. Ian envisioned the role as a vehicle for the British pop singer and actor Adam Faith. Well, it turned out that Adam Faith was not available for this project, and Ian discovered that writing a stage musical was a bit harder than he had anticipated, so as with the War Child project, the whole thing got shelved except for the music. So Anderson now had 2 batches of songs, neither of them complete. The songs recorded for the Jethro Tull album in Brussels, and the new songs he'd been writing for the stage musical in Montreux. And the obvious thing to do was to combine them and make a new Jethro Tull album out of that. So in January 1976, the band recorded the new songs in Monte Carlo using the band's own Maison Rouge mobile studio. And with the songs completed and the track order finalized, it remained to make an album cover. So graphic designer Michael Farrell was recruited to do the cover. And it's his art that you see on the front. Now, Ian Anderson had the idea that the story of the musical, as vague as it was, would be told in comic strip form inside the album's gatefold. Farrell, who had no experience doing comics, discovered that positioning word balloons and creating panel layouts wasn't as easy as it looked. So without the band's knowledge, he subcontracted that part of the cover out to comic artist David Gibbons, who at that time was pretty much just starting out, but he went on to become a big name in the comics industry. The album introduced 1.5 new members to the Jethro Tull lineup. The one was new bassist John Glasscock, replacing Jeffrey Hammond, who quit the music business for good at the end of Jethro Tull's 1975 tour. John Glasscock had become friendly with the Tull members when his band Carmen supported them on the War Child tour. And here's Carmen's 3rd album, The Gypsies, from 1975. Carmen also included vocalist Angela Allen, who does some backing vocals on the Too Old to Rock and Roll album. The 1/2 was Dee Palmer, who, wasn't really new because she'd been associated with Jethro Tull right from the beginning as their orchestral arranger, and B, wasn't really a member of the lineup yet, being credited as a guest on the album cover, but would join the band on stage on the subsequent tour and would be credited as a full member on the subsequent albums. And besides the usual orchestral embellishments, Palmer's contributions to Too Old to Rock and Roll were playing a saxophone solo on From a Dead Beat to an Old Greaser, and playing an instrument called the Vaco Orchestron. Now, the Vaco Orchestron was an attempt to make a professional version of the Optigan, which was a sort of low-budget home organ instrument made by Mattel, so you know it's swell. The Optigan and the Orchestron were both variations on the Mellotron concept, using recordings of actual instruments, only instead of using tape, as in the Mellotron, the Orchestron and the Optigan used photoelectric circuits that read the recordings from a plastic disc and sounded really cheap. Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die was released in April 1976 in the UK, where it reached number 25 on the charts, And the following month, May 1976, in the USA, where it reached number 14, both a slight dip from Tull's previous performances. Now, in May of 1976, I was in my third year of college, and I had a friend named Jacob who was really a big fan of King Crimson, and he had organized a Robert Fripp birthday party. And at this party, he played all of King Crimson's albums that had been out up till that time. And he actually had a cake made with the Lark's Tongues in Aspic cover design. So I got razzed for leaving the party for an hour because I wanted to hear on the radio when they were premiering this album. It hadn't been, it wasn't out in the stores yet. I think it was going to be out the following week or something. So I wanted to catch that premiere. So I actually had to take a break from the King Crimson Robert Fripp birthday party. When the album did come out, my girlfriend at the time picked it up for me. I was, one of my classes was organic chemistry, and I was in the OChem lab that late afternoon when she had picked up the album, and she brought it into the lab to, and this is sight unseen. It's in a bag, and she said, "You're not going to believe this cover." And yeah, I pulled it out and saw this, and wow, this is a Jethro Tull album, but there it is. Before the album was released, however, Jethro Tull got an offer from London Weekend Television to do a TV special. It was going to be the first in a series of pop music TV specials produced by London Weekend Television. And the obvious thing would have been to do a live performance of the new material, but an actual live recording was too risky, too logistically difficult, so the thing to do was going to be a lip sync job. But musicians' union rules precluded them from simply miming to the actual record. So, over 2 days in March, they went into Morgan Studios in London and re-recorded the entire album to present on the TV special with the band miming and augmented by some suitably ludicrous video effects and comedy bits. And the special was filmed on April 7th and broadcast in July. 39 years later, in 2015, the alternate version of the album, now remixed by Steven Wilson, was released on vinyl as the TV Special Edition. And the reason this was used as the version that Steven Wilson applied his magical remixing skills to is that the original multi-track tapes for half of the original songs on the regular version of the album are lost. So it was decided that we would get the TV version, and it's really awesome to hear because they've done a very faithful reproduction of the album as originally recorded. It's very audibly different throughout, and it's every bit as good, and in some ways it sounds better than the regular album. Track 1 on the album is Quiz Kid, spelled with 2 Z's on the original album, later adjusted to just 1 Z in Quiz. The album actually begins with a premonition of the title track. It's the first verse of Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, done as a little intro. On the original album, that's tracked in along with Quiz Kid. On the 2015 reissue, it's given a separate track entitled Prelude. Quiz Kid itself is a song about quiz shows, TV game shows, and a sort of satirical take on them. Kind of an odd way to start the album, an odd topic, and an odd way to introduce the story of Ray Lomas, but there it is. It's very much an ensemble piece. You hear all the instruments of Jethro Tull, strong guitar from Martin Barre, lots of orchestration from Dee Palmer. You've got the pizzicato strings and some horns going in the background there. One thing that's characteristic of this album is you don't have a lot of instrumental solos. Almost no guitar solos, really just one on Taxi Grab, and nothing that you'd really call a flute solo. The flute is used for playing riffs, for doing some really nice lead parts, like towards the end of Salamander. There's a great flute line, but it's not what you'd call a solo. And just it's used as a texture instrument. Again, on Salamander, while the vocals are going, you have just some flute being used as a pad in the background. But it's a very song-oriented, very lyric-oriented, and mostly ensemble album without that kind of prog rock display of prowess. It's all very arranged. And I think that's one of the things that allowed them to so quickly do a recreation of the entire album when they did the remake for TV. Track 2 is Crazed Institution. This was one of only 2 songs that was still in the set by the time I saw them live on the tour for this album. I know they'd done 1 or 2 other songs earlier in the tour. Taxi Grab had been part of the set, but it's kind of common for the earlier part of the tour to include more songs from the new album, and some of them stick and some of them don't. Crazed Institution is a song that's inspired to an extent by the glam rock movement, and it's got references to platform soles and wearing makeup, and that's a bit more relevant to the story of Ray Lomas, because Ray Lomas is the 50s rocker kind of guy who can't hang with the 70s glam rock pretty boys. It's again a kind of satirical take on the whole thing. Instrumentally, there's a bit more emphasis on Ian Anderson's acoustic guitar and some wonderful little flute twiddles that sort of fill up the various crevices in the arrangement. It's hard to explain just how these little twiddles really are so effective in the arrangement. And John Evans' piano is particularly notable here. Besides doing some great just textural moves, he plays this hammering thing, this kind of rock and roll riff. I think of it as like a Jerry Lee Lewis kind of move, where he's just playing empty fifths or something in a high octave and going ching, 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 ching. And that's something that recurs throughout the album, that rock and roll hammering on the piano. The song also comes to a really strange ending where this weird echoing reverb is applied just at the fade out. So it's barely there, but it's an interesting effect. This is also the first of 2 songs where Angela Allen from Carmen is providing some backing vocals. This album is the first time Tull had ever used backing vocalists or outside vocalists like that. Track 3 is the aforementioned Salamander, a wonderful acoustic track, primarily an acoustic guitar duo between Ian Anderson and Martin Barre, but the other band members creep in a bit here and there. And as mentioned before, there's a beautiful flute part at the end, but the acoustic guitar playing is really the star here. Ian Anderson was experimenting with open tunings and really produced something fine with the track Salamander. Very sparse lyrically. It has only a brief vocal part, but very effective. Actually quite similar to Cold Wind to Valhalla on the previous album, Minstrel in the Gallery, except that track eventually crashed into heavy electric stuff. This is sticking with the acoustic modality. Track 4 is Taxi Grab, a song about stealing a taxi. And this is easily the hardest rocking thing on the album. Very gutsy and bluesy, very heavy guitar, and Ian Anderson breaks out the harmonica, which he hasn't played since Stand Up in 1969. It's also the only track with a real guitar solo, so Martin Barre makes the most of it by playing first a brief double-tracked guitar solo and then moving over to slide guitar for the second half of the solo. The song also has a nice fake-out ending. It's one of those false endings that gives us a little instrumental lagniappe at the end. Side 1 ends with From a Deadbeat to an Old Greaser. And this is a song where Ray Lomas encounters an old friend, and they have different visions of what the old times meant to them. So this is sort of a rumination on the beatnik view of the 50s or the early 60s. And Ray Lomas sort of ends up by saying, hey, that's nothing to do with me. Musically, it's a very sort of melancholy and acoustic-based piece of music. This is the one where Dee Palmer plays what's described in the notes as a late-night saxophone solo. But I want to demonstrate, if I can, something about the chord progression of this song, because I think it's really artful. So we're in E flat. Start on the chord of E flat. Then it goes to G minor, B flat, back to G minor, down to F. Then the F becomes minor and shoots back to E flat. Then it's A flat to D flat. And to me that feels like a coming home. This is where it's lodging at this point. It's going down to D flat. So then it goes back up to E flat to start the next cycle. And because it feels like almost a resting place when it hits that D flat, going back to the E flat, one tone higher, feels like it's a chord change. It feels like, in classical music, it's called an unprepared modulation, because in classical music you're supposed to follow certain rules of approach when you change keys. In rock music or country music or whatever, it's called a truck driver's modulation, because it's just like you shift gears. And you hear that on so many records where, you know, they'll get a little excitement or a little extra tension by just shifting the key up a tone. And it's like a fake out version of that. You get Da, da, da. That sounds like it's going up a key, but it's actually just starting the cycle all over again. And that's the chord progression that runs through the entire song over and over. And because it's slow enough, you forget where the key center was at the beginning. And it gives you that effect of you're moving to a new one and building up that little extra tension, but that's never really happening, and Ian Anderson is never straining his voice by going higher and higher. It's just that, as I said, very artful effect of devising a key progression or a chord progression that does that. Side 2 begins with Bad-Eyed and Loveless, the shortest track on the album at 2 minutes 11, and this is also the last piece that was recorded for the album. The band does not appear here. It's an Ian Anderson solo performance featuring absolutely superb acoustic guitar playing. Ian Anderson's acoustic guitar work is so overlooked because he's so associated with the flute. Everyone concentrates on that and neglects a track like Bad-Eyed and Loveless, where he just displays the kind of prowess of a Yanch or a Renborn on the acoustic guitar. Brilliant stuff. From there, we go to the first song that was recorded at the Monte Carlo sessions, Big Dipper. And this is a swaggering song with really nasty lyrics about troublemakers showing up at the resort town of Blackpool in the north of England, where Ian Anderson spent much of his younger years. So I think there's some personal reminiscence involved there. Definitely ties in with the kind of persona of Ray Lomas. And Angela Allen, once again, provides some backing vocals. And we have more of that hammering rock and roll piano from John Evan. Very cool ensemble playing, unique sounds on this one. Great track, one of my favorites from the album. Next up is the title track, Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. And this is, as mentioned before, recorded at the Brussels sessions. We hear John Evan playing a real piano. Most of the piano on this album is electric piano. It's a conspicuously prominent sound in many of the songs. So I'm guessing maybe they just didn't have a grand piano. They didn't bother bringing one for the Maison Rouge recordings, but in Brussels they've got a real piano for Too Old to Rock and Roll. Maddie Pryor from Steel Eye Span provides some backing vocals this time. And the song, of course, is not literally about being too old to rock and roll, which is, you know, a phrase that I think Ian Anderson knew would dog him for pretty much the rest of his life. It's more a song about the cyclical nature of fashion. I think those are the words he would use in interviews, or he may have used that on stage as well. And it's because the Ray Lomas character, the song ends with the old rocker. It's a song about the old rocker seeing his friends turning into straight suburban middle-class types, and he regrets this and feels all nostalgic, and he ends up making a big motorcycle run and then crashes. And the inspiration for that title line, that Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, came when Ian Anderson was on an unpleasant flight during an American tour in the earlier part of 1975. So he felt that he might not get out of that one, and came up with this line. But again, it's more a song about the story in the end, because Ray does not die in the crash. Ray continues to reappear in the next song. And indeed, the next song begins with, "If you think Ray blew it, there was nothing to it. They patched him up as good as new." So the idea here is that after feeling sorry for himself because he's completely out of fashion, he comes out of the hospital only to find that the cyclical nature of fashion has brought him right back into the forefront, and now he's not just fashionable, he's a hero. That's it. Pied Piper. A little bit in the same vein musically as Crazed Institution, insofar as it's not an acoustic song, but it very prominently features the acoustic guitar and the strings, so it's a lighter feel to the arrangement, not so rocky. And the album ends with "The Checkered Flag," spelled British fashion with a Q. This features solemn and meditative verses, very delicate, very beautiful, really, swelling up to a sort of triumphant sound in the chorus line or the title line. "Isn't it grand to be playing to the stand, dead or alive?" That's the subtitle, "The Checkered Flag, Dead or Alive." And maybe Ray Lomas is a little bit of both. So that's my take on Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. Thank you for watching. Be well. I will talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.
Taxi!